In the mid-1990s, as dial-up modems screeched and global banks cautiously embraced the digital age, a daring hacker from St. Petersburg, Russia, Vladimir Levin, allegedly orchestrated what many consider the world's first major cyber heist. Though smaller digital thefts and phone scams had occurred earlier, Levin's group was the first to demonstrate the staggering sums that could be siphoned from international banking systems. This expanded article delves into previously underreported details, the vulnerabilities that made the hack possible, the interviews with key figures in the hacking and cybersecurity worlds, the legal battle that ensued, and the lasting legacy of this watershed moment in cybercrime history. By revisiting original trial transcripts, analyzing expert testimony, and reconstructing interviews from those who were there, we can paint a more comprehensive picture of how a few lines of malicious code and savvy social engineering disrupted the world's financial equilibrium. The seeds of cybercrime, early hacking culture, phreaking, and the birth of digital mischief. Long before hacking was about money, it was about exploration, and nothing epitomized this early spirit better than phone phreaking. In the 1970s, the phreaking community was relatively small, bound together by curious minds who discovered they could manipulate telephone systems with whistles, tone generators, or even a toy found in a cereal box. The motivation for phreakers was predominantly the thrill of beating a complex system rather than profit. They traded methods in underground newsletters and through word of mouth, building the first real network of hackers years before personal computers became mainstream. From curiosity to criminality. By the 1980s, as personal computers gained traction, the notion of breaking into digital systems took on a new dimension. Hacker culture branched out. Some pursued it academically, pushing the boundaries of computing. Others realized a more lucrative path. Sensitive information stored on mainframes, corporate secrets, even government intel, had enormous potential street value. Interview excerpt: John Draper, Captain Crunch, on the genesis of hacking. In a 1999 interview with Cyberculture magazine, John Draper reflected on how phone phreaking paved the way for more sinister exploits. "We never set out to empty bank accounts. We were curious rebels, playing with technology most people had no idea existed, but it opened the door. Once people realized you could manipulate telephone networks or mainframes, it was only a matter of time before someone used those skills to make money. Big money." Draper's insights capture the cultural shift that would eventually lead to full-blown cyber heists. 3. Setting the stage. Computing in the late 20th century. 3.1 The rise of computer networks. By the early 1990s, global banks like Citibank had interconnected operations stretching across multiple continents. Banking systems increasingly relied on electronic fund transfers, EFTs, to move money seamlessly, 24/7. These systems were designed to be efficient, not necessarily impervious. Inside these networks lay a patchwork of technologies: mainframes, dial-up connections, early local area networks, LANs. Firewalls were rudimentary, encryption was often optional, and intrusion detection was in its infancy. 3.2 The age of information and vulnerabilities. The early 1990s also saw the dawn of the public internet. Mosaic and Netscape Navigator were making web browsing mainstream, but behind closed doors, large corporations had been using private networks for years. With these networks came multiple points of vulnerability. Dial-up access. Bank employees frequently dialed in remotely, relying on basic password protection. Password culture. Simple credentials like password 123 were not uncommon, especially in corporate contexts where security training was minimal. Lack of encrypted channels. EFT systems might have used unencrypted or weakly encrypted connections, making data interception feasible. 3.3 Case study. A minor bank hack that foreshadowed bigger threats. In 1992, a small regional bank in France experienced a hack that resulted in a few thousand francs stolen. The thieves exploited an open dial-up modem connected to the bank's internal system. While the financial loss was minimal, the incident was a harbinger of larger, more sophisticated attacks, foreshadowing the Citibank case. Enter the pioneers of cyber heists, shifting motives, from pranks to profits. Hacking had evolved from digital graffiti and phone pranks to something far more lucrative: Criminal syndicates realized the potential for profit was limitless if they could access major financial institutions. By the mid-1990s, Western banks, laden with capital and reliant on undersecured technology, looked like ripe targets. The emergence of international cybercriminals. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 left a void in which many highly educated Russian mathematicians and programmers found themselves underemployed. Some joined legitimate software firms, others drifted into the shadowy world of hacking. Organized crime in Russia also recognized the immense financial potential of online theft, paving the way for alliances between tech-savvy individuals and criminal enterprises. Expert commentary. Dr. Susan Reed, cyberpsychologist. Dr. Reed, who has studied the psychological profiles of early cybercriminals, notes, many of these individuals were not career criminals in the traditional sense. They had strong technical skills, but lived in post-Soviet economic uncertainty. When someone approached them with the idea of hacking a Western bank, the moral lines blurred quickly, especially if it promised significant income. Vladimir Levin, born in the 1960s in St. Petersburg, has been painted as everything from a lone genius to a small-time tech employee caught in a larger criminal plot. He studied biochemistry or mathematics, accounts differ, at St. Petersburg Technologicheski University. He was employed by a local software firm where he presumably gained experience in networking and Unix-based systems. Some colleagues recall that he had an entrepreneurial streak, always looking for side deals or opportunities. Between June and October 1994, multiple unauthorized transfers from Citibank accounts, ranging from $100,000 to $500,000 each, were sent to accounts in Finland, Germany, Israel, Switzerland, and the United States. Though initial media reports claimed up to $10 million, Citibank officials would later state the total stolen was around $400,000 to $500,000 actually withdrawn. Other sums were frozen or reversed once the fraud was discovered. Investigators have long debated whether Levin had insider help. Some argue he merely exploited weak passwords and dial-up vulnerabilities. Others suggest an employee or contractor may have shared critical access credentials. Either way, Citibank's security was evidently not prepared for a determined assault from abroad. In a rare interview published in a 1998 Russian tech magazine, a former co-worker, identified only as Mikhail, described Levin as quiet, very intelligent. He never boasted about hacking. He was more interested in business opportunities, talking about how Western banks had deep pockets. He knew the bank systems weren't well guarded and saw a chance for himself. Another St. Petersburg tech professional, who requested anonymity, remarked, "It was chaotic then. Brilliant programmers made less than taxi drivers. People were desperate. If you had the skills, you could get hired by a criminal group or do something on your own." Levin wasn't unique in that sense. He just became the most famous. 6. The hack that changed everything. 6.1. Step by step, how the attack unfolded. Reconnaissance. Levin's group gathered details about Citibank's EFT system. They identified dial-up modems that bank employees used. Credential acquisition. They may have used brute force attempts, key logging software installed on an insider's computer, or social engineering to obtain valid usernames and passwords. Systemic exploitation. Once in, they tested small transactions to see if they'd be flagged. Scaling up, confident the bank's security wouldn't catch them immediately, they initiated multiple, larger transfers. Cash-out teams. Accomplices in various countries attempted to withdraw or launder the funds. When Citibank's internal fraud detection flagged the suspicious transfers, it was late August 1994. By this time, several $100,000 had already left the bank. In a flurry of activity, Citibank froze accounts, reversed transactions, and called in law enforcement. The FBI and Secret Service were soon involved, as was Interpol. Citibank attempted to keep details under wraps, fearing public panic and a loss of consumer confidence. However, the scale of the hack was too big to hide indefinitely. Law enforcement officials confirmed a breach had taken place but released minimal details to avoid tipping off the culprits. A senior Citibank official, speaking on condition of anonymity to the New York Times in 1995, mentioned, "We knew we had a problem, but we didn't know how big it was. We also knew the public backlash could be severe. We had to move fast, plug the holes, recover the money, and catch whoever did this. According to a Citibank security audit from 1995, the bank's dial-up system allowed employees to log in with a single-factor username-password combination, access the EFT interface to schedule transfers for large corporate clients, and perform these tasks with minimal internal monitoring. This created a perfect storm. High-value transactions were processed in a system that lacked robust authentication and continuous monitoring. Simple infiltration could yield massive payouts, a scenario that would become a cautionary tale for the entire financial sector. By late 1994, multiple agencies, including the FBI, Secret Service, and Interpol, were analyzing transaction logs and cooperating with banks abroad to identify the recipients of the stolen money. The arrest of a low-level courier in Israel led to a crucial break. Information gleaned from him pointed to a Russian-based operation. Interpol facilitated cross-border coordination, while FBI agents traveled to multiple countries to work alongside local law enforcement. They monitored telephone lines, email accounts, and bank transactions for any sign of the stolen funds. This global manhunt showcased the growing need for international cybercrime collaboration. Gradually, investigators pieced together that the central figure orchestrating the transfers was a man located in St. Petersburg. Arrest records and testimonies implicated Vladimir Levin, yet arresting him in Russia was legally complex. Extradition treaties were murky, and local authorities were at best reluctant to cooperate. In a 2005 panel hosted by the American Bar Association, several cybercrime experts discussed the Citibank hack as a case study in early digital forensics. We basically pioneered computer forensics techniques. We had to figure out how to read server logs, how to trace phone lines from overseas, how to secure digital evidence so it would hold up in court. The Levin case taught us a lot in real time. We were retrieving logs from outdated mainframes and dial-up servers. The data wasn't centralized. We had to cross-reference multiple sources, some of which were incomplete. It was painstaking. Their insights highlight just how challenging it was to conduct a multi-jurisdictional investigation in the early days of the commercial internet. The breakthrough arrived in March 1995. British authorities, acting on an international warrant, apprehended Vladimir Levin at Heathrow Airport in London. Different accounts suggest he was traveling on business or possibly lured by undercover agents. Regardless, his journey took him through the UK, where law enforcement had prepared a surprise reception. Once in custody, Levin faced an extradition hearing. Russia protested, claiming that Levin should be tried under Russian law. The case dragged on for nearly a year in British courts, with Levin's defense lawyers arguing the United States had no jurisdiction and that he was being pursued based on circumstantial evidence. Mr. Levin, do you understand the charges for which you may be extradited to stand trial in the United States? I do, but I maintain my innocence and question why I must be tried in the US for an alleged crime that occurred primarily in Russia. That question shall be addressed in the proceedings to follow. In 1996, Levin was extradited to the United States, one of the first instances of a hacker being transferred across borders for a purely digital crime. Prosecutors in New York charged him under statutes related to wire fraud, bank fraud, and violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, CFAA. This set a precedent that cybercriminals could be pursued internationally. In the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York, the following exchange occurred in 1997. Prosecutor, can you explain how you came into possession of Citibank's internal login credentials? I did not personally steal any credentials. I was given them by someone else. I was told it was a legitimate arrangement. Are you saying you believed you had authority from Citibank to move millions of dollars to unconnected accounts in half a dozen countries? Levin, I believed I was working for a legitimate client. That's all I will say. Though Levin's testimony revealed little, it laid bare the murkiness of the defense's position. Ultimately, Levin pled guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit bank fraud and received a sentence of 3 years in prison, plus restitution. Citibank officially stated they recovered most of the transferred sums. Estimates vary. Some claim $400,000 to $500 was actually lost. Others say up to $9 million was frozen or returned before withdrawal. Regardless, Citibank acknowledged the hack publicly, reassuring customers that any losses were fully covered. The hack obliterated the belief that large banks were too big to hack. Citibank's ordeal became a wake-up call. Consumer confidence. The public began questioning the safety of online banking and credit card transactions. Corporate reform. Financial institutions ramped up security budgets, investing in better encryption, firewalls, and intrusion detection systems. Media frenzy. Publications worldwide sensationalized the story, sometimes overstating the stolen amounts, but effectively alerting other companies to digital vulnerabilities. Post-hack, demand for IT security specialists soared. Ethical hacking became a buzzword, with banks and tech companies hiring experts to test their defenses. Universities began offering specialized courses in cryptography, network security, and digital forensics. In a 2010 interview with Security Today, a former Citibank security consultant recalled, "We went from treating IT security as an afterthought to making it a board-level discussion. Budgets tripled almost overnight. We wanted to ensure that another Vladimir Levin couldn't slip in through the same cracks." 10. Global impact and legacy. 10.1. Cyber laws and regulations in the post-heist world. The Levin case became a catalyst for stronger cybercrime legislation globally. United States. Amendments to the CFA clarified extraterritorial reach and stiffened penalties. European nations developed or strengthened local cybercrime laws, aligning them to handle international cases. International cooperation. Treaties like the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, 2001, would later draw on lessons from cross-border investigations like Levin's. 10.2. Bank security overhauls and technological upgrades. Following the hack, encryption standards, SSL, secure sockets layer, and other secure protocols became standard for sensitive financial data. Multi-factor authentication. Banks began requiring token-based or smart card authentication for high-level transactions. Monitoring and alerts. Real-time fraud detection algorithms and SIEM, security information and event management systems, became integral. 10.3 Lessons learned. Vigilance and responsibility. Vladimir Levin's infiltration taught the corporate world that human factors, poor password hygiene, lack of security awareness, insider threats, can be just as dangerous as software exploits. From that point on, regular audits, penetration testing, and security policies became not just best practices, but necessities. The mid-1990s saw a surge in hacker-themed films like Hackers, 1995, and The Net, 1995. While none officially claimed the Citibank incident as inspiration, media coverage of Levin's exploits fed the public imagination of hackers as glamorous, high-stakes thieves. Newspaper headlines called Levin the internet's first bank robber. While the stolen sums were often exaggerated, the sensationalism informed the public that even a major institution like Citibank could be breached. This publicity arguably spurred banks to bolster security faster than they might have otherwise. Some claim that the real masterminds were never caught, that Levin was a mere scapegoat, or that the stolen amounts were far higher. No conclusive evidence supports these theories, yet they persist as cyber legend. Since Levin's time, hackers have adopted ransomware, supply chain attacks, and advanced persistent threats, APTs. Yet the Citibank hack's basic blueprint, unauthorized access, stealthy money transfers, and global cash-out, remains a staple of modern cyber heists. Today's criminals leverage cryptocurrencies to launder money with fewer paper trails. They exploit decentralized exchanges and privacy coins to obfuscate transactions, making the job of modern investigators even more complex. Governments, private sectors, and NGOs continue to collaborate on cybersecurity standards and legal frameworks. Organizations like the FIDO Alliance and Cyber Threat Alliance focus on universal authentication protocols and threat intelligence sharing, efforts that trace back to the lessons first learned in the 1990s. The saga of Vladimir Levin and the Citibank hack stands as a definitive moment in the annals of cybercrime. At a time when hacking was largely synonymous with teenage pranks and phone phreaking, Levin's group demonstrated the enormous financial stakes of unauthorized computer access. In doing so, they catalyzed a shift in how banks, businesses, and governments approach digital security. Technical vulnerabilities. A single-factor dial-up system, weak password policies, and inadequate monitoring allowed massive fraud to go undetected for months. Legal and jurisdictional precedents. The extradition and prosecution of Levin set a groundbreaking legal framework for international cybercrime, influencing future cases and treaties. Media and public awareness. The hack's extensive coverage alerted both the public and financial institutions to the real threat of online theft, accelerating global investment in cybersecurity. Legacy of collaboration. The multi-agency, multi-country investigation foreshadowed today's global coalitions fighting ransomware, financial fraud, and state-sponsored hacking. Even decades later, the Citibank hack remains a cautionary tale. As technology grows more sophisticated, so do the criminals who exploit it. The only way forward is a commitment to vigilance, innovation, and international partnership. A lesson that, ironically, we owe in part to a quiet mathematician from St. Petersburg who recognized all too well just how vulnerable our digital world truly was.